Hi. So today I just wanted to touch on a few things which I wrote down. Um, so the things I wanted to talk about were women and the roles that women play in society and the roles that are allotted to women in society. Speaking from the female perspective, you can never really fully explain, like to a heterosexual man, what it's like to come into consciousness as a woman. I mean, I think there's a sense of you're born, and the first few years of your life, if you have a relatively normal life, you're not really conscious of gender too much. But then at a certain point, your soul has to then be indoctrinated into acknowledging or having it be enforced upon your soul that you are female or you are male. And so at some level, at some point in your human consciousness, in your development, your soul development, your soul gets, assigned this gender, right? So you're 2 or 3 years old and someone plops like dolls in front of you or frilly little skirts or what have you, and then they give trucks and guns and little hunting apparatus or bow and arrow or what have you, sports equipment to the boy. So you're 2 or 3 by the time you're starting to acknowledge that there's a difference between you and the other, and the difference is that you are supposed to be interested in the frilly skirts and the little doll and the nurturing and so forth. So pretty young girls are indoctrinated into this concept of being the nurturers and indoctrinated into being the mothers and the caretakers, and they're the ones that take care of the babies, and they're the ones that play house. And so pretty early on, girls get indoctrinated into how to be a good person of your gender is to be a good caretaker. How to be a good person of your gender is to keep that little baby doll alive or learn how to cook and clean and so forth. So even now you'll see advertisements for engagement rings, and you'll see that the man is like thinking and thinking and thinking about how to pop the question to marry the woman. But you won't see the society that supposedly has equal opportunity for both genders. You won't see the same society, like turn on the television, you just won't see it, or turn on the radio, you just won't hear it. You won't hear the same society say to the woman, "Oh, I know when you're thinking about popping the big question to Tommy, your boyfriend, and like how are you gonna pop the question and what ring are you gonna pick out to put on him?" And when you think about rings and the history of rings of slavery, or just that someone is marked with a talisman of some kind, a signifier that they are owned in some respect. The woman is then owned by the man, when you think about just purely the engagement ring itself. So very early on, these girls are indoctrinated into this, right? They're indoctrinated into thinking, I can only hope to wait to be asked to be married. This will be my goal in life, is to hope and pray that somehow if I play the game right or play my cards right or get myself attractive enough to meet these obligations, these expectations that you see perpetuated in culture on TV and media of what an attractive woman is and what an attractive man wants from his attractive woman and so forth, that the status that the woman is hoping to achieve is the status of being asked to be married. And so little girls really young will get really indoctrinated into the idea of becoming married and playing marriage and asking the little boys to play house with them, and that they will be that they will hope to be married even from a young age. That's like a goal that's planted, a seed that's planted for the little girls. And I'm just speaking to the little girl experience. And then as girls get older, they learn that their mothers or their fathers treat them differently based on gender. Their grandmas and grandpas treat them differently based on gender. Their siblings treat them differently based on gender. A lot of the message that little girls get is the good girls are the peacemakers. The good girls are the ones who keep their mouths shut. The good girls are the ones who know how to behave. The good girls are the ones who are not difficult or bitchy. The good girls are the ones that aren't the cunts. The good girls are the ones that aren't the sluts or the hoes. Like, very limited range of like what's not a good girl. And we often talk about in feminism like this concept of either the virgin, right, or the whore. Like you really only get two like options. You're either the virgin or the whore, and a lot of times with the way that women are spoken about, it's really more of like this virgin whore complex. That somewhere you're bad enough to entice men and attract men, but then you're in the whore category, or you're a pure woman, a good woman who maybe the man doesn't want to have sex with, but he idealizes as like the pure woman, and the woman who's the good woman, right? Because there's, at least in Christianity, there's this concept, and also within Judaism, but the concept of Adam and Eve in terms of the original sin originating from women and women's lack of self-control, and women cultivating evil or embracing evil, or becoming unpure by virtue of engagement with the snake. And the snake is very symbolic of sexuality and so forth. So what that teaches then is that women are uh, the root of all evil, and that they've brought down civilization. They're kind of the root of original sin by virtue of their sexuality. So we're very scared of women's sexuality, and as a culture we're very scared of women's sexuality, and so I think we do a lot of misogyny within the culture. But as women get older, from a very young age, they are taught to suppress their emotions, and that a good way to kind of shut women down is to label them crazy, or that they're witches, or that they are feminists. Like there's all these ways to just kind of dismiss the female voice and dismiss women. So it's a really quick way to degrade women and to basically just cancel them out as if they have no power. And what's interesting is that as girls grow up, they slowly get older in this society, and as they get older, they become more subjected to sexual exploitation. So it could be their cousin molesting them, it could be a cousin or a babysitter or an uncle or something. And a lot of times these stories are just covered up, right? So there's not a lot of empowerment for girls to talk about sexual victimization. But I would argue that the sexual victimization goes beyond just those molestations or those rapes or those incests that we don't talk about within the family, that scar these women for life. And oftentimes you see very sexualized young girls who become sexual very early and who are called tramps or hoes. They really have been sexually molested, and it's just never been addressed. And so unfortunately, they're still hurting themselves. They're still reenacting that trauma. Sometimes we reenact trauma in the hopes of correcting it. We think if we can, our subconscious thinks, if we recreate the scenario where it occurred, then we will potentially find the opportunity if we keep recreating the scenario. Like if you were molested or raped when you were younger, then maybe you become a prostitute or something, and maybe subconsciously you hope someday to overcome that victimization. So you keep subjecting yourself to the victimization. We keep replaying trauma. Oftentimes you'll come from a family of a lot of violence, and then you'll recreate that in your own life, because we keep recreating our trauma, our childhood trauma, so that we can heal our adult selves. This is very common. So in the case for young girls, as they get older and older, they get subjected not only to the family violence or the family culture of sexualization that happens for young girls, where they get molested or their boundaries are not respected and honored from a young age, because I think in a lot of ways girls' bodies are considered to be almost a communal thing. You know, we see breasts everywhere that sell everything. And then if you think about meat, there's a lot of correlations in feminism between meat, like cuts of meat, like the thigh or the breast and so forth, that almost have association with the female body. And so it's almost like, in a lot of ways, we've made the female body be a body that's for everybody. Everybody gets to trespass past the woman's boundaries and have access to this like communal body that's the female body. So what's interesting is, as girls become more exposed to this, like first your soul learns your gender, and then you learn that there's things associated with your gender, that there are roles, there are attributes, there are goals, like finding a man or taking care of the baby or cooking or cleaning or keeping everyone safe or being a good girl, not being fussy, not being emotional, not being a bitch, not being a nag. Like certain things that girls learn at a certain age as they begin to evolve in their own development. But then as they get older, they start to experience society, right? And society at large, at a certain point, like when you're young, you're like a cute little girl, and they're like, oh, aren't you cute? And are you daddy's little girl? And are you a good little girl? And like lots of things like this. but it's all like kind of like cute foo-foo stuff. Like maybe the little girl is dressed up in a pretty little dress and it's all so cute, and let's get her a plastic stroller made from China, which gives us cancer because of the pollution, but it's okay. Like it's really cute, the little girl, as she's developing and so forth. But then at some point, the girl becomes sexualized. And how the girl becomes sexualized is she starts to enter into society at large. And the girl could be 9, 10, 11. It could be a lingering gaze. It could be the neighbor who always wants to like hug her too tight. It could be, so it's not always like really obvious sexualization that occurs, or to be sexually to be seen in a sexual way, but a girl loses her innocence pretty young. She loses her innocence pretty young, not just because of society and the glamorization of misogyny that you see worldwide, or how I spoke before about how women's bodies are almost like a communal body for people to feast upon. It's almost like this body that anyone can partake of. Your body isn't really your own. And I think in a lot of ways we see that with women's rights in the world today, like in terms of abortion rights and things like this. We really don't see the comprehension that women have their own bodies and that they are owners and manifestors of their own destiny, and that they own their own bodies and no one gets to have their body or rule their body. It's supported by our culture even to see women's bodies as something that are up for grabs, that anyone gets to dictate and anyone gets to say whatever they want about women's bodies, or use women's bodies to sell things, that women's bodies are kind of like the ultimate joyride of society to utilize however they want. So as these girls grow up, they start to realize that they are a sexual thing. Like they're actually a commodity in a way. They're like a jug of milk going down the street, and there are thirsty people everywhere, right? And so girls learn pretty young, and also they learn from their elders, right? Elders will be like, did he touch you? Did he touch you? And maybe if you didn't even have that fear in your consciousness, but now like old men are to be feared. You're 7 years old and your nanny is telling you, did he touch you? Did he touch you? And that thought hadn't even entered your mind. But because it's such a reality, right? This predator relationship that we kind of cultivate with girls, in terms of that girls need to be on their guard, and they need to not wear slutty things, and they need to always be in protection mode. And ask anyone who's like a PTSD survivor, and it's like, that's the worst part of life, right? Is that they're constantly having to be on their guard, and they're constantly having to be worried about what's going to happen. That the danger could happen when they least expect it. So as girls get older, they begin to realize that even if their mom and dad told them that they're safe, that's a lie. They're not safe, right? So mom and dad tell you that you're safe, but actually you go out into society at large, and society at large is making it a liability to be female. And how you're taught that as a young girl is men will start flirting with you, or men will start coming on to you, or men will start being aggressive with you, or saying you look hot or you look good. And I don't think men will ever understand this. Like, you can try to explain to men, and then sometimes they might say, well, I have my own issues, and I have my own societal constructs that inhibit me or that plague me. But do they really understand on the daily what it means to be sexualized from the moment you wake up in the morning till the moment you go to bed at night? So literally, unless you're like a fat hag, or you are, I don't know, just completely unattractive or something, for the most part, women are just going to be harassed. It doesn't matter what you look like. It doesn't matter how old you are. Women are just harassed. And a lot of it is the sexualization of women. So it means that people get to look at your body, and people get to comment on your body, primarily men, and that they get to come on to you or be flirtatious with you. They get to suggest through their body language that they might give you a better deal on something. Like if you acquiesce to them. Acquiesce to them could be as simple or as innocent as, could you flirt back with me? Like, I'm the shopkeeper, I'm going to give you a deal on that drink, but I just kind of need you to, just shoot the shit with me or something, right? But the expectation then is that you're a good little girl and you do what daddy says, right? So you do what the big man says. So you flirt with the man or whatever. But these little things that women do, it just takes away from their self-esteem. It takes away from their soul, right? They don't even recognize it in the moment, but like at a certain point in their life, they're like, "Oh, this feels horrible. Like, why am I doing this?" But they can't stop it because it's perpetuated in society all around them in terms of who has access to my spirit. And I think a lot of times young girls are taught you are here for all of humanity. You're here as a sexual thing for men to look at and comment on daily. This is a daily experience that women go through daily. They are harassed, they are cajoled, they are touched, they are brushed up against, they are squeezed, they are patted, they are flirted with. Power is used to dominate them in some way or make them feel less than. They're told through subliminal and obvious methods or information that's just produced by society that if they acquiesce and kind of suck that dick, basically like just oblige these men in society, like don't be annoying back to them or don't be feisty or something, like just kind of do what they say, then they'll be rewarded in these monetary ways. I mean, if you really look at modern dating, a lot of modern dating is basically prostitution. I mean, basically, like the woman goes out on the date and maybe she gives the guy a hand job and he pays for dinner. And basically, when you look at the inequity between men and women in terms of how much money they make, I think in a lot of ways it's a setup. So these women are in a position where economically, in a lot of ways, they need to almost prostitute themselves, or they've been indoctrinated into that from a young age, and they feel like they have to be prostituted because literally when they walk down the street on the daily, which is a very depressing thing for women, they are coming up against people having the right to comment on their body and people having the right to leer at them and bump up against them on the bus or comment to them and invade their space. These are not things that men are necessarily exposed to. You don't see women harassing men sexually on the cultural, like, worldwide level that you see men harassing women. And it's just heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking because it's like this silent epidemic and we don't even really deal with it. We don't address it. And we certainly perpetuate this rape culture in our society. Like, if you look at a lot of discussions on date rape drugs or if the girl was raped and all these other things, we basically imply that the girl should not be wearing slutty clothes instead of educating our boys to be aware about rape and to be aware about sexual victimization and to be aware about sexism. Another message that's sent to girls worldwide is the number of rape kits that go untested. And I think what that says to girls, because if you look at UAs are done for people who are assuming, they assume the police or whomever assume that the person is on drugs. UAs are done like drug testing is done within like 24 hours, right? For crimes and things like this. When girls hear, in so many ways, but when girls hear that they are second-class citizens, and they hear that in a number of ways throughout society, but if they hear that they're second-class citizens, they hear that in a very loud way. So on the news, they might just brush over, like, there's 20,000 rape kits that have gone untested. How the little girl transmits that message to her, higher self, her child self, is they don't care enough about these rapes. So if you got raped, they're not going to care either. Like, basically, if you get raped, no one cares. That's the message that gets sent. The other message that gets sent to young girls from a young age is that they're supposed to be the one cooking and cleaning the bathrooms. Like, the person who's supposed to be scrubbing the toilet is the woman. And I've yet to see a commercial that really has a man bent over the toilet, really scrubbing the heck out of that toilet, talking about his lovely hands and how this new soap scrubbing, thing that he found is not hurting his dainty little hands. Admittedly, I don't watch television, but when I glance through, at people's televisions in their homes, when I visit them, I certainly don't see any commercials that really highlight that men are cleaning and cooking and scrubbing toilets with the same excitement that women are. And I think that sends a message pretty darn early to these poor little girls, which is, along with maybe being a straight A student and going to an Ivy League college, the first job you have is you are going to be the cooker or the cleaner for this family. You are going to be the one scrubbing the floors. You're going to be the one in those commercials who's worried about her little paws, because she's scrubbing the toilet day and night. And those boys, they're going to be too busy doing whatever it is boys do. they're not going to be the ones scrubbing the toilet. You're going to be scrubbing the toilet, and that's your job because you're a woman. So girls learn pretty easy or pretty early that they have this role in society, and that role is dictated by those around them. So oftentimes women are very, very sensitive and very, very attuned to rejection by the world around them. I would even argue that women are more sensitive to that than men are, and that in general women being socially accepted is a tool that's used against women. It's like a weapon, and it's really unfortunate to see. So similar to the way sometimes we talk about internalized racism, where you'll have a black person who is harder on her black employees than she is on her Caucasian employees. And when that's kind of broken up and dissected, it really comes back to these internalized concepts of race and value and who has value. So sometimes the best slave driver is the top slave, right? The best slave driver is the person who can be indoctrinated into hating their own people, or perpetuating the hate that they've been taught about themselves. And sometimes we're not conscious of that. So what's interesting with women is that women will bring each other down. This is heartbreaking, but I've witnessed it so much. So women won't support one another. Women will talk trash about one another. Women will critique each other for things like, taking selfie pictures of themselves. Women are just very cruel and very unkind to one another, and that's a form of patriarchy. That's patriarchy leaking on down. So women aren't taught to rally together and be a support to one another and accept each other in all of our shapes and flavors and sizes. But women are really taught in general to breed competition and to compare themselves with one another, and they're not taught to hold each other up and be there as sisters to one another. So it's very heartbreaking in general that you have a society that tries to really make women victims, in the sense that they are sexualized from such a young age, and they're taught to be the caretakers of society. They aren't really allowed to have a voice in the way that men are. But then on top of that, you teach women to fear and distrust and compete with one another. So it's very diabolical if it's some kind of system that's been created, or perhaps it's naturally evolved, but either way, it's quite a diabolical system. It's very insidious as well. So the things that I had wanted to talk about today was that women in general are meant to rise up out of whatever has happened to them in their lives and become something greater and more beautiful and strong and promising than any of these images that they're fed. And in history, there's been beautiful images, Nefertiti and so forth, of women that are strong and potentially gender neutral, or who co-ruled huge civilizations with their mates, and they were respected. And Nefertiti is always one of my favorites because in some of the hieroglyphic paintings or what have you, her skull size, which is kind of a symbolic of power, her skull size is the same size as her consort. So basically, if you think about Nefertiti, her mate didn't say, let's get that painted on the wall of the, cave or the pyramid or whatever. Let's make sure Nefertiti's brain size is smaller. I just feel like there's a correlation there with, this is a woman in history who was allowed to co-rule. This was a woman in history who was upheld as one of the creators of a new religion in ancient Egypt, but she also isn't painted or portrayed in a way that is somehow less than, that she has less power than her consort. She was seen to have equal power in this one example. So I don't think history has always had these images of women that are sexualized, that their worth is in their appeal sexually, or that they always need to be these people-pleasing women who have to be nice and sweet and so forth. So when women put down other women, it's just fascinating to really examine, because ultimately what other women are doing to other women is they're putting them, kind of stuffing them back in a box. Like, if one of your female friends is trying to break out of that social paradigm and be something bigger and greater than whatever society has told her based on gender. And if her female friends inadvertently, subconsciously, are trying to snuff out that fire, part of the reason for snuffing out that fire is that the other individual feels scared. You know, it changes their paradigm. It threatens their box, right? So a lot of times you'll see someone kind of like that internalized racism who's also female putting down the female who's trying to change and trying to be something other than this nice female that we are taught that the world needs. So a lot of times in the world in general, you're taught that politics for women, they need to be a very nice passive process. They need to be a very people-pleasing process where women are basically they can get their point across, but they do so in a nice way with a smile. And they're not difficult women, and they're not angry women, and they're not fighting women, and they're not difficult and nasty or super angry or being aggressive. You know, there are these concepts of aggressiveness with women that we're really scared of as a society. There's these concepts of anger with women that we're very scared of as a society, and it's fascinating to me that you'll have a lot of maybe women that are more passive. Let's say they really believe in passive actions to affect justice, but they aren't willing to own the fact that passive more complacent, more easygoing, more sweet, more nice, more loving, more hippie, more, you know, let's be peace activists and, you know, do moon ceremonies or something. They aren't willing to realize, like, there's a different generation of women alive today maybe who would then look at these ways of existence and say, I'm not really interested in being this sweet, passive, happy, hey, do you think you could, like, stop spraying the crops with poison? Like, some women are just done with that bullshit, right? Some of these women are like, yeah, I tried to be nice and sweet and do the hippie march and wave my peace flag. Nothing changed, right? Nothing changed. So now I'm just pissed. Now I'm just angry, right? Now I'm ready to fucking change the system, right? And who's with me, right? But I think a lot of women are scared by that, right? Because for them it feels like, hold on, wait a second, we got to break out the peace flag, right? We can do this in a peaceful way. But the reality is that maybe we can't do it in a peaceful way. Maybe the peaceful way has been tried, and we now need these women that are angry and that are ready to rally and that aren't willing to kind of sugarcoat things and be sweet and be nice. They're pissed and they're going to vote with their money, and they're not going to be nice about it. And I think that's the biggest issue that I see women being asked to do by other women, which is, I need you to be nice about this. Whatever it is that you need to make happen in the world, I need you to be nice about this. But I don't think we have the same expectations for men. So why is it that we are asking women, our fellow women, to be nice about it and to be sweet and to be kind and to show compassion? Because the reality is that the world really hasn't shown women that much compassion. If you look at the delineation of wealth in the world, if you look at pornography, if you look at child rape, if you look at sexual victimization, if you look at untested rape kits, if you look at how young girls, there's basically pedophile in Japan in terms of the culture and how they treat women, you don't really see a lot of compassion. So I think women are not necessarily served by always being compassionate. And I think there's this real fear of being a bitch, right? There's a real fear of having people not like you. Because women have been traditionally taught that it's the one essential thing that kind of marks them as a good human being is to be well liked, right? So you see women that are very concerned with popularity. They're very concerned with being well liked and having lots of friends and having people like them. Doesn't necessarily serve humanity, doesn't necessarily serve women, doesn't necessarily serve that individual. But I think women get to say to themselves, I'm well liked, and that gives them a sense of value because society from a very young age has told these women your value primarily, first and foremost, lies in, are you well liked? Are you well liked? Are you a good girl? Are you nice? Are you sweet, right? So if you are a woman that says, hey, it's great that Sally and May and Faye and Janet and Janice and, you know, Rebecca, that they all want to be sweet and nice and that they want to pray for you or buy you cookies or, you know, cook you bread or do something sweet and nice for you. But that's not me, right? I'm not going to do that shit, right? I'm angry. I'm actually going to change the system. I'm going to speak out. I'm going to be pissed off, and I'm going to be aggressive. And I wouldn't say that I'm a proponent of aggression for aggression's sake, but I think when you look at history, women have not been served necessarily by being sweet and nice and kind and loving and passive, that they actually have been almost like a disservice to not just their fellow women, but society at large. If women are truly the caretakers of society and the planet and the children and so forth, the planet's not doing that great, right? The children are not doing that great, right? If you really research how many children go missing in the world, like globally, it's astounding. So we're not doing that great of being these protectors of humanity or of children or of civilization. So my point is that as hard as it is for a woman to challenge the world, it really starts with those relationships with other women. I think that it's actually harder to fight women than it is to fight men on this issue. And it's similar to the way that sometimes people of color say it's harder to challenge other people of color about internalized racism than it is to challenge someone who's in power over them, who's a Caucasian person. I think sometimes women are their own worst enemy with each other, and it's fascinating to me how much women feel like they have the right to put down other women, and not just put them down, but to put them down for really sexist concepts. Concepts of, you need to stay out of the big discussions, or I don't like your tone, or you're too aggressive, or what have you. And these are things that maybe traditionally, it's kind of like that slave master idea. These are things traditionally you would receive from the slave master, right? Which is be a good girl, don't fuss, don't fight, be well liked, go cook, go clean the bathroom, get married, look pretty, let people stare at you, let people ogle you. Like, your role is to be pretty, and your role is to have babies, and your role is to shut up and be treated like a second class citizen, and to be well liked. You should have a smile on your face while you're going through all these atrocities that I just mentioned from a young age that a girl goes through. So it's really fascinating then that it's like not the slave master, then it's almost like that head slave who then comes to you, that female friend, and says, I really don't like your tone. I think, you can do a kumbaya and we can all get our message across by going to march with Greenpeace. And you kind of just want to say, okay, Greenpeace, not working. Okay, Greenpeace, great agency, maybe not working. So your idea of how a woman should be in the world is very hurtful to me. It actually hurts and breaks my spirit because I'm not going to fit into that role. And I think that role is actually a disservice to women. So I think if you want to be this peaceful, sweet advocate who's waving your flag, that's great, and show your compassion towards these people that are destroying our earth. They're literally destroying our earth. And if we wait around and have compassion for them and sit around and are nice and sweet to them, nothing's going to be left, right? So I'm sorry that you get offended by aggressiveness or unkindness or judgmentalness or what have you, but it's a time of judgment. It's a time of judgment, and now is the time. So it's time to be judgmental. It's time to be honest and straightforward and angry and aggressive and state our judgments, right? And it's not a time to be well liked. And I'm sorry, we'll just have to cast off all of that expectation for ourselves that our main purpose in life is to be well liked, because you may lose friends, and you may be that bitch that no one likes and so forth. And that's okay, because the world is worth so much more. And helping to create a better world and saving the one we're in is worth so much more than being well liked and having people think that you are handling things appropriately. No one should tell you if you're handling things appropriately. You know inside your heart if you are handling things appropriately. You don't need to listen to anybody, and you don't need to be validated in anyone else's eyes. Just validate yourself.